If you've been following the media over the past week, you probably think that the election is over, but that is actually not the case. This is your 2020 election update, and I'm your host, Roman from the Epoch Times. On the morning of November 7th, most large media companies such as CNN, NBC, MSNBC, ABC, CBS, the Associated Press, USA Today, and the New York Times, virtually all in unison, made the call that Joe Biden was the new president-elect. Fox News joined them about 10 minutes later. And right afterwards, huge crowds of people began to gather in large cities across the U.S. to party, celebrate through dance and music, seemingly with very little concern for social distancing. And in fact, when I was walking through Brooklyn on Saturday night, there was people partying, having barbecue, and listening to Joe Biden and Kamala Harris's victory speeches. But is it really the case that just because the media says so, Joe Biden has won the election? No, it's actually not. In fact, it's premature, and in my opinion, it's unbelievably irresponsible for the media to call this election at a time when there are still recounts, lawsuits, and audits in at least 6 key battleground states that have razor-thin margins. We here at the Epoch Times will not declare a winner in the 2020 election until all of these challenges are resolved. Because this is the way that it should be. It's not the job of the media to declare a winner. Instead, it's really the state legislatures as well as the Electoral College that certify presidential elections. And as a matter of fact, what has to happen is that all 50 states must certify the election, present the results to the Electoral College, which then votes to determine the official outcome. And until this happens, there is no president-elect, no matter what the media says. And this is not even a partisan issue. I mean, it's just a statement of fact. And the media really should know better, because just a short 20 years ago, there were quite a few media outlets that called the 2020 election for Al Gore prematurely, and we all know how that turned out. So today, let's take a trip together and see what's really happening in the 7 still undecided states, which are Nevada, Arizona, North Carolina, Alaska, Georgia, Pennsylvania, and Michigan. But before we do, I wanted to let you know something. It seems like YouTube might be restricting content like this that's about the election. So I would highly recommend that you take a second to smash that like button that's below this video. That way, if the algorithm is still functioning somewhat properly, this video can be shown to potentially thousands of more people. So let's start with the 2 relatively easy states, Alaska and North Carolina. Both of them, as of now, don't have any legal challenges or recounts on the horizon. But 6 days after the election, they are still tabulating votes. Based on the numbers that we're seeing, Alaska, which is of course a Republican stronghold, will almost definitely go to President Trump with their 3 electoral votes. Now, North Carolina, they finished tabulating about 97% of their ballots, and they have President Trump in the lead by about 80,000 votes. So barring any unforeseen developments, that'll be an additional 15 electoral votes for President Trump from North Carolina. So now with those 2 easy states out of the way, let's move on to the more contentious states. Let's start with Wisconsin. On November 4th, the day right after the election, the Trump campaign requested a recount in the state. The early data shows Joe Biden with about a 20,000 vote lead, which is a razor-thin margin and well within the range of a recount request. In Wisconsin, the state law says that a trailing candidate can request a recount if the margin is within 1 percentage point, which this is. President Trump's campaign manager said that there have been reports of irregularities in several Wisconsin counties, which raised serious doubts about the validity of the results. Yesterday, President Trump's deputy campaign manager announced that his team has taken the steps to initiate the recount, adding that, quote, there were some serious irregularities on Election Day that they're looking into. So until this recount is done, Wisconsin's 16 electoral votes are still hanging in the air. Now let's move over to Michigan, which also has 16 electoral votes which are hanging in the air. According to unofficial results that have not yet been certified, Joe Biden was declared the winner in Michigan with a margin of about 145,000 votes. However, an election fraud lawsuit has been filed, alleging that tens of thousands of unsealed, unsecured ballots, all cast for Democrats, arrived in vehicles with out-of-state license plates in Michigan's Wayne County at 4:30 a.m. on the morning after Election Day. A sworn witness testimony said that, quote, at approximately 4:30 a.m., tens of thousands of ballots were brought in and placed on 8 long tables. Unlike the other ballots, these boxes were brought in from the rear of the room. And it goes on to say, I specifically noticed that every ballot I observed was cast for Joe Biden, end quote. So that is obviously a very, very serious claim that warrants investigation. And that same lawsuit also alleges that Michigan poll workers were told to backdate ballots and not verify signatures. Now, backdating ballots would of course be illegal and allow people who sent in their vote after the November 3rd deadline to still count. And besides backdating ballots, in a sworn affidavit attached to this lawsuit, an employee with the City of Detroit said that she, quote, directly observed on a daily basis City of Detroit election workers and employees coaching and trying to coach voters to vote for Joe Biden and the Democratic Party. She also said that she witnessed election workers, quote, encouraging voters to do a straight Democrat ballot. Now, the difficulty with a lawsuit like this is that even if the judge agrees with the claims, what would the possible remedy even be? Because any ballots that might be backdated or otherwise problematic would likely not have been segregated from the other normal ballots. So even if the lawsuit goes through successfully and the judge agrees, what would be the result? Well, the plaintiffs in this lawsuit are requesting that the court void the November 3rd Michigan election results altogether and order a new election to be held. And so that's obviously a very, very tall order, and we'll just have to wait and see whether it comes to fruition. But besides even the claims in this lawsuit, there appears to be many other problems with the election process in Detroit, which if you want to read more about, we'll put a link in the description box below this video. Now let's move our discussion eastward to Pennsylvania. The day after the election, the Trump campaign filed two separate lawsuits in that state. The first lawsuit called for a court to order a pause in vote counting until Republican observers were granted adequate access to supervise the process. The Trump campaign said that the Republican poll observers were kept too far away, sometimes even as far as 20 or 30 feet away from the counting tables and the scanners. They were never able to see the ballot itself. They were never able to see if it was properly postmarked, properly addressed, properly signed on the outside. And these are all the things that often lead to ballots being disqualified. Now, the second Pennsylvania lawsuit challenged a court-ordered deadline extension for first-time voters. That's a little bit more technical, so if you're interested in learning more about that, we'll put a link in the description box below this video. Now let's take our discussion south over to Georgia, where there's an active recount underway. With the initial count, Joe Biden appears to hold a 10,000 vote lead over President Donald Trump. That is a very, very slim margin, well within the guidelines for a recount in Georgia. And so the Trump campaign has requested one, adding that, quote, they are concerned about the lack of transparency in the tabulation process, especially given the reports of irregularities and improper ballot harvesting in Georgia. One issue that they are likely referring to is the fact that at least 3 Georgia counties experienced glitches with Dominion voting software. Now, that's the same software that in one Michigan county erroneously handed the winning number of votes to Joe Biden. And so Georgia's 16 electoral votes are also still hanging in the air. Going westward over to Arizona, the Trump campaign and the Republican National Committee filed a lawsuit over rejected votes in Maricopa County. And for your reference, Maricopa County is the largest county in Arizona by far. Something like 60 to 61% of all Arizonians live in that one county. This lawsuit alleges that in-person votes were disregarded as a result of improper guidance by poll workers. So basically, when a vote tabulation machine detects an overvote on a ballot, the proper procedure is that a poll worker should inform the voter of the error and give them an opportunity to correct the issue. An overvote, by the way, is when a person votes for more candidates than is allowed in a given race, almost always by accident. But the lawsuit alleges that instead of doing that, poll workers in Maricopa County either pressed or told the voters to press a green button on the machine to override this error, which wound up supposedly invalidating the voters' ballots. And with the Arizona race being so tight, who knows what this can do to the final outcome. And lastly, in Nevada, the local Republican Party there announced that its lawyers have sent Attorney General William Barr a criminal referral alleging at least 3,062 cases of voter fraud in Nevada. And this referral came right after an announcement by President Trump's re-election campaign, which said that they were filing a lawsuit in Nevada over thousands of ballots that the campaign said were cast by voters who no longer live in the state. So as you can see, there are still a lot of unknowns to work through in this election. There are still millions of votes to be recounted, and there are legal challenges that need to be settled in key battleground states. And that is exactly why the Epoch Times will not call this election right now. Because no matter what the media says, and no matter how many media outlets say it, Joe Biden has actually not been certified as the winner of any state thus far. And until that happens, we will continue to follow these developments and report things as accurately and honestly as possible so that you can know what's truly going on. Until then, I'm Roman from the Epoch Times. Stay informed and stay free.